In nearly every major country around the world, birth rates are falling fast. Italy, South Korea, Canada, the United States, all are at their lowest historical birth rates. Each year, more people have fewer kids. In Japan, the decline is so steep that population researchers even have a name for it. They call it a demographic time bomb.
And just like that, the future starts getting quieter.
We've seen governments attempt to manipulate their populations in the past, often with unintended consequences. We'll talk about that in a bit. But if birth rates keep falling and the population problem keeps getting worse, what does that mean for our future? Could society as we know it actually disappear? Could there come a time when there are simply no more people?
Wait, could that actually happen?
Apparently, it can. Henan Province, China, early 1992. The Li family lives in a small brick house surrounded by wheat fields. Their ancestors have worked this land for generations. They're not rich, but they have what they need and they get by. They have a 6-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. Under China's one-child policy, that son is illegal. They've kept him hidden for a year, and in a village where everyone knows everyone, that's been no small feat. Every spring, government officials arrive to conduct a head count. But this spring, the officials come early. The Lees scramble. The mother wraps the baby in a blanket and slips him into a used grain sack, then hides him in the corner of their darkened basement. Upstairs, there's a knock. The Lees are terrified, but they have no choice. They have to answer. Mr. Lee opens the front door, and standing there, waiting to come inside, are the officials. This was the reality for many families in China at the time. But before then, the story looked very different. After the Communist Revolution in 1949, the government actually encouraged people to have big families. More people, more strength was their slogan. China's population exploded from about 540 million to over 1 billion by 1982. More people meant more mouths to feed. And after famine and food shortages, leaders grew alarmed that resources couldn't keep up. So in the early 1970s, the government launched campaigns urging couples to marry later, wait longer between children, and have fewer of them. It worked, but not fast enough. In 1979, the government imposed the one-child policy, a massive social experiment with harsh enforcement. Because of this, the fertility rate dropped from over 7 children per woman in 1963 to below 2 by the early 1990s.
Whoa, that's a big drop.
Yeah, but here's the twist. China wasn't alone. Birth rates in the West were collapsing too. And right now, around the world, they're the lowest they have ever been. So what's going on? Are governments around the world colluding to bring down birth rates and we don't realize it? In 1800, American women typically averaged around 7 children.
That's what China had at their peak.
Quite a coincidence. But it wasn't unusual back then. Women often started having kids early and continued into their 40s. Families were large because they had to be. Children worked the fields, they kept the household running and cared for parents in old age. Back then, kids were the retirement plan.
I'd name my first kid 401 and the second K. 401K.
Really? That's actually kind of funny. But there was another darker reason families were so large. Famine and war killed people all the time, especially children. In 1800, global life expectancy was at about 30 years. In the US, it was better, but still low at 39. These averages were dragged down by infant and child mortality. Back then, it was like Squid Game Kids Edition. If you survived, the prize was you might get to live to your 50s or 60s. Through the 1800s, life was still hard, but survival began to improve. Cities built sanitation systems, pasteurization made milk safer, and during the Civil War, the US government stepped in more directly, funding hospitals and offering pensions for veterans. For the first time, Washington showed that the state could help families survive. As life expectancy rose, families, whether they realized it or not, didn't need as many children to get by. Birth rates dropped as a result, from over 7 children in 1800 to about 4 in 1900.
Whoa, almost cut it in half.
Yeah, and the trend didn't stop there. In the US during the early 20th century, government stepped in even more. Vaccines had been around for some time, but schools now began requiring them. First for smallpox, which had killed children for centuries, then diphtheria, another major killer. For the first time, the government started enforcing health measures. States banned child labor and new education laws kept kids in school instead of factories. It seems very positive, and it was. Children weren't seen as help anymore. They were treated as, well, just children. Then came a darker turn, eugenics. In the 1920s and 30s, more than 30 states passed sterilization laws, deciding who could and who couldn't have children. The US wasn't alone. In Nazi Germany, those same ideas would be carried to horrific extremes. Government started to control reproduction itself. This was a dark time in human history, as eugenics was deeply flawed, so thank goodness the idea of it is largely past.
That we think.
What do you mean?
It never really went away. I'll tell you why in a bit.
I think you should just tell me now.
Nah, I think I'll just save it for later.
That kind of interrupts my flow, but okay.
Carry on.
There were other changes where the government got involved. Out of the Great Depression came Social Security. For centuries, children had been sort of a retirement plan. But in 1935, the US government took on that role instead. All of this change had a dramatic effect on birth rates. And by the 1930s, US women were averaging just 2.1 children, a steep drop from the 4 in 1900. And 2.1, it's a number that matters. Not 2, not 3, but 2.1. That's the replacement rate, the number that decides whether a population grows or shrinks. Above it, society expands. Below it, society contracts. So for the first time in American history, population growth was no longer guaranteed. But then, in 1939, something happened that would change the world forever. Something terrible. World War II, a dark chapter in human history. The war began in 1939, but when it ended in 1945, the world had changed forever. Borders were redrawn, entire nations ceased to exist, the atom itself had been unleashed, and 2 world superpowers emerged, the United States and the Soviet Union. In the aftermath of the war, global institutions were created to manage peace, money, and health. You might have heard of them. The United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, and soon after, the World Health Organization. A new world order had been born. Out of the rubble of World War II came something also unexpected, a surge in births. It was a baby boom. And at its peak in 1957, US women were averaging nearly 4 children each. Families were the biggest they'd been in half a century.
Wait, didn't you just say birth rates were collapsing?
I did. The baby boom was a spike in a longer-term trend. See, after World War II, the US government expanded its reach even more into people's lives. They promoted college through the GI Bill, subsidized oil, gas, and nuclear power, and plastics, that industry exploded. Energy was cheap, economies roared, suburbs grew, and optimism roared. The American dream was real, and families had kids to match. But the forces pushing birth rates down never subsided. With improving healthcare, death rates continued to fall, and life expectancy climbed.
Okay, well that makes sense now. Remember the eugenics topic?
Sure.
Get this. In 1952, something called the Population Council was founded by John D. Rockefeller III.
That's a fancy title.
The Population Council's mission was to address concerns about rapid population growth around the world. It was a lot like eugenics, but without the name.
You got my attention.
The council promoted family planning, contraceptive research, and had a big hand in funding forms of birth control. They were worried that the population growth would outstrip food and resources. They became very influential in the US and UN and worked closely with the Ford Foundation, USAID, and the United Nations Population Fund.
I didn't know the United Nations had a population fund.
It's amazing what you can dig up on the internet. It's still around today, by the way.
That's good info. Then came the 1960s and 70s, and the US saw massive social upheaval. Birth control in the form of the pill was developed and distributed.
Population Council had a hand in that, no doubt.
I'm sure. During this time, women joined the workforce with a newfound sense of liberation. These new freedoms and trends encouraged extended education, and a lot of people started to focus on their careers, rather than having families. All the new choices plus consumerism meant more competition for goods and services. The cost of living rose. Houses, cars, schooling, people wanted more, but it all started to cost more. Inflation hit hard by 1970, and the taxes in the US were sky high. Having a family became more expensive than ever.
The government wanted their cut, eh?
By the mid-1970s, the birth rate replacement level in the United States fell below 2.1. The baby boom was over.
And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero, rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has four factors. Thing on the left, CO2, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services, the energy, and the CO2 being put out. So let's look at each one of these. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Let's pause here. What unfolded in the United States after the baby boom wasn't just happening to America. This same pattern showed up across the world. Every time we see modernization take hold, it's almost as if someone or some group of someones wants it this way.
Did you just hear what Bill Gates said?
New decades, the 1980s and 1990s, and technology was really starting to take off. Things the world had never seen before. Home computers, cable TV, cheap communication, the internet, a little thing called video games. Consumerism and capitalism were in full swing, and people now had more to distract themselves with than ever.
Let me guess. Birth rates dropped more than ever.
You got it. Technology did help bring some people together, online dating, for example, but these modernized cultures also saw an increase in individual isolation, a focus on me. Email, smartphones, blockbuster movies, you name it. There were now tons of things to keep people busy besides trying to start a family. And sure, a lot of people were still having kids, but a lot now weren't, the most ever in history. A new golden age of technology had come, and along with it, a rise in governmental control through regulations and taxes. It kind of makes you wonder, has there been some sort of master plan to keep the people occupied, keep them consuming and buying products while the elites gain more control and take more power?
The role of low birth rate in the decline of civilizations. I think it was around 50 BC, Rome passed a bill to give a bonus to any Roman citizen that would have a third child. So this was birth rate was a problem in Rome in 50 BC. The Romans weren't making Romans. The same is true of ancient Greece. It seems to be that prosperity destroys the birth rate.
He's right. Greece and Rome really did decline in part because birth rates fell.
And before they collapsed, they tried to fill the gap by importing people in huge numbers. The same fix we see today. Mass immigration props up populations, but it's often temporary and controversial. The difference now is the scale and how it feels coordinated, backed by global institutions.
The New World Order again.
Could be. If this is true, then modern society works like a pyramid. You need a wide base of workers and consumers to hold up the top. Without enough people at the bottom, the whole thing topples down. And leaders know this. In the US and other Western nations, immigration has kept population numbers rising, even though birth rates have fallen below the replacement level for decades. But look at Japan. Immigration there is limited, and their numbers are collapsing fast. China, amazingly, is in a similar situation. They ended the one-child policy in 2005. Their population is set to be cut nearly in half by the end of this century, from 1.4 billion to under 800 million. And speaking of China, remember the Li family? The officials did discover their illegal baby, but the Lis were allowed to keep him in exchange for a hefty bribe. They had to surrender nearly all their land to the government, land their family had owned and worked for generations, gone overnight. That's power, that's control, and the elites, they're pretty comfortable at the top, while the poor fall further behind.
The rich get richer, and the poor get poorer.
Today, the cost of living is higher than ever. In 1970, a home in the US cost about 2.2 times the national average income. In 2025, it's over 4.2 times, the highest ever. Birth rates, the lowest ever. And now we layer on climate policy with its carbon taxes and green regulations. The climate agenda raises the cost of energy and transportation and food, basically everything. Progress is being sold as saving the planet, but for ordinary families, it makes survival even more expensive. So as we look to the future, we gotta ask, what's coming next? New Jersey, USA. The year is 2205. The Swinton family lives in a world reshaped by rising seas. Coastal cities are gone. Ice caps have melted. Humanity clings to scarce resources. Unable to have children of their own, the couple joins an experimental program to have an artificial child. He laughs and plays. He calls them mom and dad. And for a while, they believe. The scientists, they believe too. A fragile hope for humanity's future. But the child isn't real. Some call him an abomination, a threat. Pressure builds until the Swintons are forced to abandon him in a vast, hostile world. For years, he wanders, searching for belonging. But the world keeps changing. Humanity fights over what's left, and then there are no more humans. Only the boy survives, a remnant of a world that once was. I didn't make this story up. This is the visionary tale told in Steven Spielberg's movie AI, which has it all. A world reshaped by climate change, shrinking populations and resources, and artificial intelligence woven into the core of a family unit. And in the end, humanity is gone. But maybe it's not just fiction. Today, AI is being courted by world governments as if it's the next industrial revolution. Robotics, automation, machine minds, all poised to reshape humanity itself. AI is replacing humans in jobs and in relationships. Do you remember the movie Her? Joaquin Phoenix's character fell in love with his AI operating system. Sounds silly, it's already happening. Millions spend more time with AI companions than with real people. And AI doesn't even need to replace us one for one. It could simply overwhelm us. NVIDIA's CEO recently bragged that soon his company might employ a few thousand humans and millions of AI workers. Imagine the balance of power in that world. Now combine that with falling birth rates and you can see the problem. If there's a catalyst to end humanity, it might be AI itself. History has taught us how fast collapse can come. In the 14th century, the Black Death spread along trade networks. Ships carried the plague from port to port and city after city fell. In just a few years, it wiped out as much as a quarter of the world's population. Europe took centuries to recover. Now layer on today's pressures, governments pushing AI, climate policies driving up costs, and a world where raising children is more expensive than ever. One big crisis could push the whole system over the edge.
Here's a fun fact. Wait, what did you say your name was again?
I didn't, but it's Craig.
Raising a child in the U.S. costs over $300,000 today. That's according to the United States Department of Agriculture.
$300,000? That's brutal. The world's population is projected to peak between 2080 and 2100 and then sharply decline. Between now and then, the average age of a person will rise dramatically. In 1950, the median age worldwide was just 23. Today, it's about 30. And by 2100, it could reach 42 or even higher. That means more old people and far fewer young. In the US, the change is even steeper. The median age was about 30 in 1950, it's around 39 today, and by 2100, it's projected to reach nearly 48. And governments, along with global organizations, will be scrambling, planning, maybe even panicking over how to manage this societal shift. Because they like their pyramid, and they like being at the top. So what's my opinion? Do I think humans are going to just disappear completely in a couple hundred years? No, I don't think that. But I do think there are forces like governments and world organizations working to shrink the population. We've seen evidence of that.
Bill Gates?
Maybe those forces have a plan to replace us with something cheaper and more efficient. I don't know, but AI can work 24 hours a day, it isn't constrained by borders, and it doesn't complain. From the point of view of the elitists, that sounds pretty convenient. I certainly don't have all the answers, but with the rise of AI, tightening resources, and fewer children, I can safely say society will look vastly different in the future than it does today. But that's always been the case. The world is always changing. Anyway, this episode got really long. I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Craig. This is my AI assistant.
I'm Remy.
If you learned something or liked what you saw, leave a comment, hit the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe.
And we'll see you next time.
If there is a next time. Dun dun dun.
What are you talking about?
He's a guy with a mic and a curious mind, digging up stories that'll blow you behind. Ghosts in the attic, aliens in the yard, no tales too creepy or totally bizarre. And meet Remy, the AI queen of sass.